Hey guys, welcome to the secret history living inside your aquarium. Today we're going to talk a little bit about history, but moreover we're going to talk about science, biology, evolution, and what we're really going to be talking about is lightning in particular. Now this may seem like a far-flung, bizarre concept to be talking about in regards to our fish in our aquarium. But if you think about the natural processes that go on from rain and snow, and that melts into water going into rivers and all sorts of tributaries and things like that, there's a seemingly secondary connection or a circle of life connection. But I'm here to tell you today that there's actually a much more drastic and important and actually active role that lightning plays in the lives of fish. And so, if you're interested in sort of long-winded, nerdy fish and science information with some diagrams, and then I'm just going to film this tank so that you're not bored because we'll pretend it's something like an NPR show. I mean, that's pretty interesting, whatever those Danios are doing, right? Well, let's start this story off with the fact that I was hit by lightning 6 weeks ago. I'm still recovering, and this has been my view since then. I've been pondering things like, how does the outside world affect my aquarium? That's the idea of this channel. And lightning sure came out of nowhere and affected my life and affected my body, my mind, my processes. And it made me wonder, is this force just a destructive one, or are there good things? Do we need it? And then beyond that, I started wondering, well, I have a YouTube channel, so where does it fit in with our aquariums, with our fish? And when I started digging, it blew my mind. It really did. So here we go. Let's jump in. First, we're going to talk about the direct impact of lightning. So lightning itself, the things it can do, and how that impacts fish. And then we'll talk about the secondary things, like, it started a wildfire and what that does for fish. And I could go into hours on this subject, but we're going to keep this as concise as possible and as interesting as possible. And in the process, we'll be talking about things like carbon, activated carbon, how that works in the wild as a filter, that may very well be in your hang off the back filters. There's a lot of stuff going on here, including things like reverse osmosis that we have learned in the hobby through biomimicry, and a thunderstorm or a thundercloud has really inspired a lot of amazing technology and thoughts and secondary processes that tie right back into this craft and this hobby and this art. So let's jump right in, and we'll talk about the direct cause and effect. So lightning, lightning, probably big clap of thunder, and you go outside, or perhaps you've already been outside and you look up and there's these ominous clouds that look like anvils that oftentimes reach up into the sky tens of miles. They actually reach the stratosphere, and they reach the stratosphere, the highest level of the atmosphere that's still in the atmosphere, still part of Earth's atmosphere, before you start going into inner space and then outer space. And these clouds reach that level, and then they flatten out like an anvil. Now, these lightning bolts can move up to 25 miles with more heat than the center of the sun. Now, that is approximately 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's the kind of heat and energy you need to actually break apart atomic and molecular bonds. Just like stars are the place in the universe, and supernovas are where elements and everything we know, everything in your fish tank, you, every part of your mind, your brain, everybody you love, every fish you love, every scale and every color on each plant was born in a star, in a supernova, where fission goes on and fusion and protons are combined to create all new elements on the elemental level. Well, lightning can play almost at that level, and it does. So one of the first things that happens when lightning cracks across the sky, making a giant flash, first you've got the light that insects and moths respond to. Oftentimes it causes them to seek shelter, but in places like the Amazon, if the rain hasn't started yet, it's simply an opportunity to see things and to get active, and they're drawn to it. They're almost like a moth to a flame, and they come out and they are more nocturnally active than normal. And this becomes a feeding frenzy oftentimes, especially at sunset, for fish. And they don't know quite why, but thunderstorms also generally have extremely low pressure going on when they happen, which relieves that pressure in the water as well. That's less atmosphere pushing down on these fish. And that may not seem like a huge deal, but it changes water currents and it changes patterns. And in rivers like in the Congo River, where they have lightning 200 days out of the year, or in Venezuela where 310 days a year and get lightning near the Orinoco River, it is quite drastic, and it has an immense impact on these wide, shallow rivers. And in the rainy season, which, mind you, is also dependent on lightning, because the thunderheads come in and they bring rain into parched areas that are sometimes 110 degrees Fahrenheit. They bring rain and floodwaters in, and we'll talk about that in a moment as the secondary effects. But as that rain is falling, something else happens. That rain directly changes the current of the water. It changes the hormones in your fish, and so does the lightning. Just like a full moon changes the perceptions and the activity in your fish's brain and in their lives. Lightning lights up the sky. It tells them it's a certain time of year. It tells them that other fish are around. It lights up the shoals so they can see predators and mates alike. Their iridescent skin underneath their scales, it shines, and they look their best even at night. Many of their scales contain guanine, which reflect off little crystals in these tiny cellular pockets. They reflect infrared or ultraviolet light, and the lightning produces that. So they appear like sparkling, sequin adorned, beautiful women at the ball, or men usually in the fish world. Maybe some Liberace, something like that. Elton John or David Bowie in the glam days. But beyond that, the power of the storm actually rips apart the atmospheric nitrogen and oxygen. It can rip apart bonds with that 50,000 degrees of heat and that motion and that violent, turbulent shock in the air, that force that is just, you can't get it from anything else in this world. Nothing else other than something deep under the Earth's core comes close to that force. And that actually allows nitrogen and oxygen to bond to one another, which creates nitrates, or nitrite first, which would be NO, or nitrogen and oxygen. 60% of our atmosphere that we breathe, when we say air, is nitrogen, and 30 or so percent is oxygen. Most people may not realize that, but that is the case. And that nitrogen is not usable by plants and animals, and it needs to be fixed to another molecule to become stable and then become metabolized by all these beautiful plants that these fish depend on. I mean, if they're getting ready and they're in the mood for their big day, with their shiny sequin outfits on, and they've got their mate, and the water's cool, and it tells them that the drought is over, that their eggs can be laid and they won't just shrivel up and dry in the dry season, that those new currents will carry them far away, all from this lightning storm, all from these clouds, from things like monsoons and hurricanes that are all over the equatorial regions where we find these fish. Especially these fish are looking at here from Southeast Asia and also Central and South America. Now, this nitrite then turns into nitrate, which is NO2. And so nitrite can turn into nitrate or various other compounds, all of which are needed for fertilizing plants and building new life. And this finds its way to the ground in forms of downdrafts, in forms of trapped in gaseous microbubbles inside of hail or in rain droplets, and is washed in from the sea. It is washed down from the mountains, and it's just kind of amazing that it can be created up there in the sky in that split second when you see that powerful crash. And so let's pull a little aside here, and I've got a diagram on how lightning works. So basically, with lightning, if you follow me here, usually lightning is coming from out at sea, and it's clouds with moisture that have evaporated off the shallow, off the sea or lakes or rivers. It's evaporated up in the heat of the day. The sun has heated it up, and it's radiating up as heat rises. Then it comes upon an uplift in the land, or simply the fact that it's over land and not water, and the heat is that much higher. The Gulf of Mexico, for instance. Yes, it's warm, it's 80 degrees or 85 degrees, but then it hits 110 degree land of water that's superheated, and that goes up, and it brings the moisture up and the humidity up. And in mountainous regions, especially in the Amazon by Peru and things like that, it really lifts it up quickly. Same with Borneo and places like that. And next, in these clouds, you've seen them, I'm sure, they're anvil-shaped cumulonimbus. The Latin origin meaning cumulo or cumulus means heap, giant pile, and nimbus means storm cloud. So giant pile, or a heap of storm, a heap of energy, and they had gods associated with each element of it, with thunder, with lightning, and so on. These forces were known to be creators and destroyers of life. So as these clouds rise, they rise 10 miles tall, they hit the stratosphere, as I said, they spread out, and these updrafts go up and up until they get cold over that warm, humid, muggy rainforest down below, if we're talking about our tropical fish, and it turns into snow or hail all the way up there. Now, it may melt and turn back into rain by the time it comes down, but there's such power in these updrafts, sometimes reaching up to 220 miles an hour. This is also in Tornado Alley in the United States. We get things like hurricanes tornadoes, and also in the Gulf of Mexico we get hurricanes. Now, think of all the species that have been picked up by these updrafts or water spouts. Also, just as a side note to these thunderstorms and supercells, and deposit new life, eggs maybe, leaves, whatever it may be, from fish into new regions. Just think about that. It's raining frogs. That's not a myth. That happens. So the lightning discharges as this battery is fueled. And you may wonder, okay, well, how is that a battery? Well, as water goes up and condenses, it condenses on nitrogen or oxygen or dust. It condenses on some molecule of something, and then the H2O can start to snowball, as we say, and turn into these ice particles as it reaches 8, 9, 10, 12 miles into the sky. And these pieces of ice are hitting each other and breaking, and then they're falling down as they're heavy and cold. And as they hit and they break, it's like rubbing balloons together, or rubbing your feet on a shag carpet, and you see your hair go up. It starts to build a charge. Only a battery or your feet or that charge is being dismissed. This is storing it up in this battery that is water, that is heat and cold and different elements, and it discharges as lightning. So the water that comes down has basically been purified. It goes up into the sky, and it basically comes out RO water, right? So it also, as secondary effects, so let's talk about the secondary effects. That was what lightning itself, the storm in the moment, does. But it also brings clean water, places like Taiwan and Vietnam, China, where you have your shrimp and your very fragile shrimp, where they get their water either from deep sources of bedrock, springs, and aquifers that are basically screened under thousands and thousands of feet of sand and rock, and it slowly drips through. Well, the other quicker way that we move water around the world, and they say that, one molecule of water can easily make its way around the world in a fish, then in a cloud, into a lake, evaporating back up into you. It is more likely than not that you have a molecule, or at least an atom, of the people who discovered and named these places we're talking about, South America, the indigenous people who live there and eat and capture and know these fish before the explorers from the Western world came. So you may have the great-great-grandfather of this fish's water that went through his gills may have made its way to London or New York. You guys might be tied that way. That's the probability when there are up to 2 trillion molecules in your body, and they move with such ferocity due to electrical storms, uplifts, heat, and downdrafts. So the main thing they do, other than the monsoons, and clearly that does all sorts of things. It brings debris into the water. It fills areas that were once dry and fish couldn't live in. It traps bugs and spiders and things that can't make it out of the way. It floods slot canyons, and it feeds fish. Now, it also starts forest fires, which can be bad for fish. It can actually cause trees to burn down and lose their roots and die gradually and wash down into the streams, causing silt and a lack of oxygen. But in a well-formed native ecosystem, be it the Pacific Northwest or the Amazon, those same plants, or Australia especially, the underbrush burns, and it burns into ash. And what is ash? It's mostly carbon and other constituent parts and biological matters, and it rains down into the lakes and rivers. And what is that carbon, especially if it was hit by lightning or if it was burned in the crucible of a forest fire out of control. That becomes activated carbon. And what do we put in pads that cost us $8 or $10 or $20 to put in your hang off the back filter? If you do that, I don't necessarily, unless I'm trying to get medication out or ammonia out. But that's activated carbon. That's activated charcoal. And the way we get that is by intense flame on organic matter. And the way carbon works is that once it has been burned to that point, it is so porous and so has such surface area that 1 gram of carbon has 32,000 square feet of surface area if you were to unfold it on the molecular level. That boggles the mind. That is so many molecular chances to bond with toxins in the water, be it human, be it ammonia, whatever it may be. It purifies the water. As silt and things fall into the stream, also it purifies the water and the things that come through. The illegal mining going on in many of these countries, it is saving the fish as their oxygen plummets. Now at the same time, the nitrates and the nitrites and the carbon and all the other things washing into the water, the dead animals and the dead debris is breaking down, and what is it becoming? It's becoming food for plants, which make oxygen. So as the sunlight breaks, and as those clouds condense, and they take that thick cloud layer, and they suck it up into one thing that lightning's going to discharge from that cumulonimbus cloud, it allows the sun in, and it heats up the water and the land, and the process starts all over. And all this is going on all over the world in different ways, to different degrees, and playing a role in your fish's life, in the evolution of these fish. Some fish only come out when the cold water starts coming because lightning only occurs then. That's why they have settings on the aqua sky or on the simulate lightning, because the Rift Valley fish, the Orinoco Delta, and the Amazon Basin fish, they know that when the lightning is constant and the water temperature drops, that it is time for life to begin again. And killifish know that the puddle they're in, where they're gasping for their last bit of air, or labyrinth fish that are breathing air in this muddy little puddle, they know it will become a torrent and a river soon when that lightning starts flashing. It's cues like this. It's the atmospheric pressure. You'll see fish start leaping everywhere and eating the bugs that come out when you have an atmospheric low. It's life itself. And as I think about how close I came to death, and I look at these little fish, it's magical. The circle of life, and how something is different and powerful and yes, beautiful, but dark for me. It's taken a lot from me. It's hard to speak and think straight, and it's taking all I've got to make this video right now, but I'm passionate about this because this is the history of our planet. This is the history of what I love. And it has touched me both from the elements that are created from this process and the ecological cycles that go on, and the fish. The fish that are used to it, that see it as par for the course, and that shimmer like their own bolts of lightning. There aren't words for the beauty of how things connect in this world sometimes. Sometimes you just need to look at that fish tank and you just know that not just the fish tank, but everything around you is connected in mysterious and deep ways. And asking questions and observing the beauty and complexity of nature, along with the science that we can absorb as time goes on. It's putting together the best in the hearts of men and women, and it's also putting together the mysteries and the beauty of the natural world. And it gives me hope. It lets me recover and recharge. So I hope you guys like this slightly more intense take on a video, but it really touches home as I recover from my burns and scars and speech issues. So that's how lightning and your fish are connected. And the world at large is connected to it. If you like this and you'd like to see more, please check out the channel, watch other videos, subscribe, like, comment, share. And if you really want to keep this channel going, my only source of funding is really Patreon. So check out the links to that. And I guess lastly, a shameless plug, I do have a Patreon for my recovery fund for copays and things from the lightning strike. And with costs so high, I regretfully will say that I could use your help. So thank you so much, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Take care. I'll talk to you later.